All right, we're going to call this to order. We'll go ahead and get started here. First and foremost, at the request of Dave Pelling, to our board chair, we have added the Pledge of Allegiance to our agenda. So Dave, I'm going to ask you to lead us off in the pledge, if you're...
Sure. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
All right, a little bit about how Board of Education meetings work. Good evening to everybody here viewing online. Before we dive into the agenda, a little information that's everyone should know. Regular Board of Education meetings occur the first and third Wednesday of every month of the school year. We convene to listen to reports of the superintendent, approve budgets, contracts, and handle necessary business tasks for Granby schools to run effectively. All agenda items are posted at least 24 hours in advance of each meeting, as required by state law. Like all operating board meetings, these are not public hearings, but business meetings conducted publicly. The Granby Board of Ed, Finance, and Selectmen offer public workshops separately and collectively, and you'll start hearing about those in the coming months as we get deeper into budget season. We do welcome public commentary at each Board of Ed meeting during the designated time listed on the agenda. Legal standards surrounding FOIA, employment, staff, and student privacy prohibit board members from engaging, but we note all input and questions from the public and work to provide responses in a timely manner. Each board member here is available to discuss your concerns outside of our business meetings, and we welcome you to contact us via email or other means. Every volunteer on this board, alongside our administrators, works with purposeful intent, courtesy, and respect, and we ask the same of members of our public. These proceedings are reported by legal mandate, and so we ask that phones are silenced and attendees refrain from talking while presenters or board members are speaking. Thank you, and on to our agenda. Our board chair, Monica Logan, is traveling on business, so I'll guide us through the agenda tonight. I'll get right to our first item, awards and recognition. We have here tonight Sarah Plitzka, who was selected by the Connecticut High School Coaches Association All-State Field Hockey Selection Committee as Class S Coach of the Year for 2025. We have Mike Dunn and Carl Gates to come up and say a few things about Sarah.
Come on up with them, Sarah. Yep.
So really going to have Mr. Gates say most of what we're really proud of about Sarah, but I am super proud and so stoked to present Sarah Pliska. She's a wonderful coach, and I've known her as an educator, someone who makes really important and meaningful and supportive relationships with kids, and that's exactly what she's been able to tap into on the field and pushing her team to excellence, and she's done so much. We're so proud of her. So turning things over to Mr. Gates to say a little bit more specifically about her accomplishments.
Yeah. I'm so proud to honor Sarah tonight. Granby's historically had a great field hockey program, and Sarah's brought us back to that championship level. We have had 2 back-to-back NCCC championships. We went 13-3 this year. We had 5 all-conference players, 4 all-state players, and that's because of our great coaching right here. We went to the state championship game and had a hard-fought battle, losing in the last few minutes, but I know we're going to get back there next year with a great team and a great coaching staff. It's my honor to introduce Coach Sarah Pliska.
Thank you for having me tonight. Appreciate it.
Well, we won't put you on the spot for any speeches. However, I do have some flowers for you and a certificate to memorialize your accomplishment, chocolates, so you might enjoy those. And then this was a great opportunity for a photo op if both of you want to join, and perfect. Yeah, perfect. Well, you should be on that. Yeah. Let me go on the other side of you. Yeah, perfect.
Should we stand up and make a funny face?
Okay.
3, 2. Sorry. All right, 3, 2. Perfect. Thank you. Thank you, guys.
That final game was amazing. I totally should have won. Couple calls just didn't go our way. But it was pretty great. Thank you for doing that.
All right, thank you, Principal Dunn and Mr. Gates. All right, we are going to move on to public comment. Granby community engagement and attendance at Board of Education public meetings is welcomed and encouraged. As is our custom, the board views public comment as an opportunity for members of the public to share their comments and concerns with the board, and board members will not be responding to comments or engaging in dialogue. As it deems appropriate, the board may place such matters on the agenda for future meetings for discussion in accordance with the Freedom of Information Act. Procedurally, public remarks will be limited to 5 minutes, and speakers will be asked to identify themselves by name and address. We expect comments to be respectful and civil in tone, and we do not permit name-calling, raised voices, personal attacks, or vulgarity. Lastly, we note that the superintendent is responsible for student and personnel matters. No speaker will be permitted to use public comment to bring complaints against any teacher, student, or staff member, or to discuss student matters which are confidential. Therefore, the use of student, teacher, or staff names is not permitted. Any such complaints or concerns should be directed to the superintendent and her team. All right, first we're going to open up public comment to the room.
Good evening. My name is Audrey Lampert. I'm a Granby resident and a parent of 2 kids who attended Granby Public Schools. I'm also a member of PFLAG Granby, which is our local chapter of PFLAG, the largest and oldest organization in the country dedicated to supporting LGBTQ+ people and those who love them. Tonight, I want to commend our Board of Education, teachers, and administrators for continuing to support health education inclusive of the LGBTQ+ community. Clearly, students feel like an equal part of the school community when they see themselves in their lessons, texts, and other learning materials. We at PFLAG especially appreciate efforts to foster empathy for our LGBTQ+ kids and see this as beneficial for all students. As empathy researcher and Stanford University psychologist Dr. Jamil Zaki describes it, empathy is a psychological superglue that connects people and undergirds cooperation and kindness. Even if empathy doesn't come naturally, research suggests people can cultivate it and hopefully improve society as a result. Empathy motivates many types of behaviors, such as forgiveness, volunteering, and helping, and it's negatively associated with things like aggression and bullying. I think we can all agree a curriculum that teaches about empathy is valuable. We applaud the efforts of our Granby educators to promote the development of this important aspect of mental health. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have anyone else in the room for public comment? All right, we're going to move to our folks on Zoom. Would anyone like to? Here we have, I see Beth.
Just raise their hand online.
Okay.
For public comment, sorry.
Sure. We see Beth.
Okay, am I unmuted?
You're good to go.
Thank you, folks, again. Now I'm getting some feedback. Anyway, I have looked through the agenda prior to the meeting, and I see that one of the items on the list, legislation update, I looked through that presentation in advance of the meeting. And so I would like to make some comments ahead of time that perhaps whoever's giving that presentation can, if it's appropriate, fill in some detail while we're going through that. I know it's talking about the latest legislation and what you have to do to upgrade existing programs or whatever to include that. But as you all know, I have a thing about the cost of everything. And so as you're going through that, I'd appreciate it if you can say if there are any additional costs involved in this new legislation. And if in particular there are any things you can do while you're looking at your existing program relative to the new legislation to identify changes you might make to improve whatever you're doing now. Because even though you call it school climate, I think a lot of that boils down to issues with student behavior and bullying. And I'm not sure if this information is 100% accurate, but I've received information relative to the number of people in various schools, starting from with Kelly Lane, Wells Road, the middle school, and the high school. And for example, I'll just read out, I think at the high school you have not only the principal, assistant principal, a dean of students, 3 social workers, 1 school suspension coordinator, 1 behavioral analyst, 1 psychologist, 2 campus supervisors, 2, well, that's for educational, an open choice engagement specialist, and a director of school counseling. And that's a fair number of people, and it doesn't even include the school resource officer. So there seems to be a lot of people, and I would like to know how they fit in and if their activities should be changed, given the fact that as just a taxpayer with no children, I constantly hear about bullying wherever I go in town. And given the lawsuit, which I don't think you need to address, but I think as a resident and a taxpayer, we're going to be questioning the expenditure on the SRO if he isn't actively involved in some of these situations, on top of all of these other people in all 4 of the schools. I counted up a total of over 30 people. So I'd like to see some improvements in the numbers when it comes to quote-unquote school climate. So any part of that you can address during tonight's presentation, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Carroll. Is there anyone else online who would like to make public comment? Is there a hand up? Nope. All right, going once? Going twice? All right, and we'll move on to our next agenda item. We do not have our student representatives here tonight. They are on a class trip. So we'll move right into our first report on the school climate legislation update. Assistant Superintendent Jennifer Parsons will update the Board of Ed on school climate legislation.
Thank you, Jen. And while Jen is moving to the podium, I'll just make one brief introductory comment. Tonight will mostly be focused on the legislation, the way that we're incorporating that, and some important data regarding bullying and the reporting mandates. This will dovetail into next board meeting on December 17th when we start the conversation around budgeting and allocation of funds for personnel and that sort of thing. So any of those questions that we don't cover this evening will be followed up with next time we're together.
Great.
Thanks.
Thank you so much. As we've heard, bullying is a word that we hear a lot. And I want to share with you a little bit today about how we always address behavior that is brought to our attention in district, what bullying means, how folks can seek support, and what has changed with the climate legislation. So I'll start with where we are and then move a little bit into how we're going to move forward. There we go. Yeah. Great. So I wanted to start with our spring school climate survey results. At the end of every school year in May, we issue a school climate survey to parents, faculty, and students at the middle and high school level. And one of the questions that we take really seriously as an indicator of our work with school climate is around responses to my child is physically and emotionally safe at school. And you can see here the ranges of responses that are extremely affirmative, that children are safe at school, ranging from 78% to 94% of families are responding that they strongly agree that their child is physically and emotionally safe at school. And just for reference, I will say that's only about 64 respondents on average per school out of about 300 to 500 students. If you can advance, please. Another piece of data I will use for grounding us where we are today is in sharing with you cases of verified bullying over the last 5 years throughout the district. So I'll start by saying, what is a verified act of bullying? And our definition has changed several times over the past few years, and I will share with you what the current definition is as of this year. But when we look at that definition of bullying, the direct or indirect act that is severe, persistent, or pervasive to either cause harm, the reasonable fear of harm, or infringes on the rights or opportunities of an individual. What would have happened in order to be a number or a tally on this chart is that there would have been a report of behavior shared with staff, either from the student, the teacher, the parent. It might have been something we observed, something that was reported to us, that was then addressed and investigated and found to meet the criteria of the definition of bullying. And so what you can see is that over the last 5 years, there have been 0 verified incidents at Kelly Lane. There have been 4 at Wells Road, an average of less than 1 incident per year. There's been 2 per year on average at the middle school and about 2.5 at the high school. And where we see some of the larger numbers are typically 1 event involving multiple students. So you can see that while we talk about, we use the word bullying quite a bit, when we think about the 1,700 students that are in our care times 5 years, the verified acts of bullying are actually very low. That doesn't mean that we don't address any behavior that is brought forward to us and make sure that, number 1, the behavior stops, and number 2, that we are educating and working to move forward in an even safer way in the future. So what has changed? Public Act 23-167 modified the school climate legislation and policy, and it required 4 things from districts. It required the adoption of a new school climate policy, and we had little say in how to shape that policy. That was a state policy that was given to us with the legislation that supported us adopting it written as is. We first brought that policy to our subcommittee in the spring of 2024, brought it out of subcommittee to the full board last spring of 25, and it was adopted in June of 25. So we started the school year under the new school climate policy. It also gives us some definitions of what is challenging behavior. And bullying is nested within challenging behavior. It's a type of challenging behavior. And it redefined terms and responsibilities around how we manage school climate at a broad level. School climate, as the definition, is on our next slide. So school climate is the quality and character of the school life with a particular focus on the quality of the relationships within the school community. and based on patterns of people's experiences of school life, and that reflects the norms, goals, values, interpersonal relationships, teaching, learning, leadership practices, and organizational structures within the school community. So our school climate is, in essence, what is living in our schools every single day. How does it feel? How are students experiencing their day? How are the adults moving through their day? Move to the next slide, please.
Jennifer, where did that definition come from?
That is directly from the state.
Legislation.
So a lot of what we do in schools already and work we've been working to develop over the past few years is proactive. In essence, it's what we're doing with every single student in all of our schools to ensure that alongside the teaching of math facts and finding evidence is that we're teaching students how to interact with one another, how to coexist in their classroom and school community, and be a productive member of our school climate and society. And so what we are doing proactively, if you look, there is a triangle, we're building the base. So we're building relationships. And some of the things we do there is that every school has school-wide expectations. For example, our middle school uses the acronym BEAR to talk about being engaged, accountable, and responsible and safe. And so we develop those school-wide expectations. We teach into them with students so that they know what those expectations are. And we have similar frameworks at all 4 schools. In addition to the school-wide expectations, each classroom has classroom routines. Teachers are building charters with their students. They're saying, how do you want to feel in school every day? And what behaviors can you exhibit that will help us feel that way, help support our learning? And what do we do when those behaviors aren't exhibited? How do we sort of check one another and bring us back to center to make sure that we have an environment where learning can occur? We've worked really hard on building connections. You'll hear examples of the Kelly Lane Cares groups, the new connecting advisories that are being put in place at Wells Road, crew with the middle school, advisory at the high school, where teachers are working with smaller groups of students to build connections. You'll see that building connections and relationships is at the core, because when we start talking about what happens when something goes wrong, we want to make sure that before anything goes wrong, we feel connected, we feel centered, we feel like we're part of the community. When you feel like you're part of a community, you want to uphold the values of that community together, and you are mutually accountable for that. We talk about celebrating successes, our Wells Done Awards, our schools in the spotlight, our people that we bring forward at our board meetings to celebrate the success. We do those same kinds of things in schools and classrooms every day. Supports for accountability. We're making sure that we have clear definitions of what is a minor or a major behavioral infraction at our schools, and making sure that our administrative team, and to address that staffing, that is our principal, our assistant principal, our dean, are working together to to communicate systems to our teachers and hold teachers and themselves accountable for those behavioral pieces, and that we're responding to all behavior that happens on a day-to-day basis, positive and negative. Tier 1 instruction, we talked a little bit about second step at the elementary schools. A lot of what I'm saying you may have heard in the school reports over the past couple of board meetings. We work to make sure that our second step instruction and our crew instruction and our advisory lessons are all directly teaching into how to be those proactive school behaviors. We use the DESA, which is a state-approved screening that asks teachers to reflect on their students and brings to light any concerning social emotional behaviors that we may want to support. We use that 3 times a year in each of our schools to monitor, and that's at the classroom level. Students who need additional support through that process and through what we call our multi-tiered systems of support may receive support from our social worker, from our school counselors. Our psychologists and our social workers are primarily working with students who have individualized education plans, are identified through the special education process. So that staffing is also always directly related to the number of students who need those service hours. But also our social workers and our school counselors will also support students who do not yet have a plan and may never have a plan, but just need an additional level of support. So we do all of that work with all of our students every day to try to make sure that we're set up for success. But we know developmentally, we're working with children, we're working with students between the ages of 2.5 and 19, and there's different behaviors that emerge at every level. So when they do, we're ready to respond to those challenges. And part of what you'll hear me talk about is what is restorative practice. And when there is harm to a relationship, when there's harm to the school community, if we've built that strong relationship, what we want to do is reset, look at what happened, how can we come back to the standard and restore that relationship. That doesn't mean that when we have something that happens, we don't also have a consequence. But one of the consequences that may come with something for example, if you're late to class multiple times, the consequence has typically been you have a detention or you lose credit. So now, in addition to potentially having that detention or Saturday consequence, if we're talking about restorative practices, we're adding in a conversation with the student around why are you having a hard time getting to class? What can we do to support you? Is there a strategy we can teach you? Is there something going on in the classroom with a student or a teacher that we can help work on that makes you want to come to class more? So it's addressing and teaching the behavior instead of just consequencing the behavior. Move forward, please. Thank you. This is an image of the Connecticut School Climate Guidance. As I mentioned, the state is giving us the exact policy to adopt, but they're also giving us a little bit of guidance. In all honesty, we could use a little bit more.
We've asked for more.
We've asked for a little bit more. But you will find this document and the policy on an updated section of our website. If you just search school climate, or if you go under the assistant superintendent's page of our website, you will find a variety of resources, including this resource right here. You could also just search it by the title if you were to go to Google or another search engine. But this guidance was provided to districts and lays out all the pieces of what is required. So we were required to adopt the policy. We're required to identify a coordinator, me, for the district. We're required to identify school climate specialists at each school. Each school is required to have a school climate committee, administer the school climate survey, which is where I started the presentation. And that committee, under the direction of the specialist and with consultation with the coordinator, are creating school improvement plans. Those plans are in the finalized stages of their drafts right now and will be posted online in the same location where I shared you that you can find this material before the end of the calendar year. Once those plans are posted, we will send out a whole district communication along with some information for parents about what changed and why, and share with everyone where you can find those school improvement plans and additional resources. Two additional pieces of the school climate policy that are required are a challenging behavior response form. So we have a standardized form that can be filled out by staff, students, teachers, parents, when there's a challenging behavior that is observed. And there is a response form and an investigation form that goes with it. I'll show that to you in just a moment. But we're also working on having training for all staff in the realm of restorative practices and pro-social behaviors. And we are working on adopting a policy that goes side by side with this that supports the restorative work. And those are all of the pieces of that school climate guidance. If you were to click on this image or you don't have to do it right now, or to find it on the website, it walks through each of those elements that I just went over. Are there any questions at the moment?
May I just underscore something, if that's okay? So this is required of every school in the state of Connecticut.
Correct.
There's no variation from the definition that you just shared, because that's legislative. The definition has changed a number of times over the time I've been teaching, but this is the most recent update.
Correct.
And in addition to that, I made a joke about asking for more guidance. We really wanted there to be more parent-facing and community-facing resources from the State Department, because I think it's easy to assume that Granby Public Schools is changing the way we do bullying, when in fact, this is a statewide unfunded mandate. Could you also just, given the Mrs. Carroll's earlier comment, you listed just now a variety of things that are necessary. Have we hired any new people, or are there any new costs related to personnel for these things? I know you listed a few things that you're now doing that you weren't doing maybe in the same way previously, but just to make note of that, if you could just expand upon it for a second.
Yeah, thank you for reminding me of that. So we have not hired any new staff members. There are districts across the state that are hiring school climate specialists. They're hiring folks to do the restorative work. They're hiring consultants. They're paying for training. We're doing 99% of that work in-house with our existing staff. And when I hear the term unfunded mandate, what it reminds me of is just that when new legislation comes out that we're required to follow, it's a shift of how we use our people and their time. So in essence, we have always, under the old legislation, I was still the bullying person to contact, right? So now I'm just called the school climate coordinator. We're clearly identifying folks that we've already hired as the specialists. Committees are volunteer work. The survey is yet to be determined if we need to purchase something that's on a state-approved list. That's happened a few times, and the state has not given us money to do that. But all of the work here is being done by existing people. It's just a different pull on our current resources.
Thank you.
So I went over this a little bit as I presented, but where are we with coming to compliance? We are fully in compliance with everything that is required of us. We adopted the policy. We've identified all roles. Our committees have been formed and met to draft those plans. They will be posted online. And right now, we're just as you mentioned, it's a shift on resources, right? So we have to embed this new work into the existing workload that we have. We're working on operationalizing what the challenging behavior forms and the protocol for responding to those looks like. And our restorative work and training is ongoing. Next slide, please. So to get into the nitty-gritty of what is revised, as I mentioned before, we're doing a lot to teach proactive, positive social behavior, create these really positive learning environments where learning can happen, both on the social side and most importantly on the academic side. And anytime there is a behavior that is of question or concern, my number one suggestion to anyone is bring it immediately to your child's teacher and or the school building administrator so that it can be addressed. There's terms we put on things, but any negative behavior is not acceptable, it's not appropriate, and it will be dealt with. It's really sad when we hear that there seems to be an issue or issues that have been festering that were not brought to anyone's attention because we can't change anything if we're not aware. What we now have for reporting, in addition to ever bringing anything forward, if you were to bring forward an issue to a teacher or the school climate specialist or the building principal, they would probably refer you to the challenging behavior report form. But even if they didn't, even if it was something little, somebody looked at your child the wrong way, they called them by the wrong name, something that was upsetting to the child, we will 100% handle it. But the challenging behavior is defined as any behavior that negatively impacts the climate or interferes or is at risk of interfering with the learning or safety of a student or school employee. So when there's an impact to the climate the learning and safety, that's when something elevates to a challenging behavior. So if there's a behavior that's observed in school by a teacher, if there's a behavior that's reported at home to a parent, if there's a student who feels that a behavior has risen to this level, we would ask you or them or our staff to fill out the challenging behavior report form. That triggers a series of events, and that's what I was talking about operationalizing the forms, where we will investigate and will respond to the person who's making the complaint. So now, with challenging behavior, bullying is nested within the definition of challenging behavior. So if there's a challenging behavior that does impact, a verified challenging behavior, that impacts the safety or learning of a student or employee, and is unwanted and aggressive, that involves a real or perceived power imbalance, that would rise to the level of bullying. So it would be an incident that was both challenging behavior and bullying. You wouldn't have bullying without challenging behavior, and you might just have inappropriate, unintended, or mean-spirited behavior that doesn't rise to any of these definitions. Does that make sense? Okay. So by reporting a challenging behavior, we will investigate it, look into it, but like I mentioned, any behavior should be brought forward. This is a chart that we shared last year with everyone as part of the communication plan. It has had a little bit of a facelift in terms of colors and graphics. But as a reminder, any concern, please bring it directly to your child's classroom teacher, which is that lavender colored arrow at the top. Contact your teacher, and if you don't have the response, you can move up to the school administrator, and the school administrator or the person making the complaint could also contact me as the assistant superintendent. And if it's still not resolved, then a district concern would be something that would rise to the level of the superintendent. But most concerns are best addressed right at the level at which they're happening, because that's where the most knowledge of all aspects of the situation are. And so what you see on the right-hand side, I already claimed the role of coordinator. Our school climate specialists are always on paper our principals. We have one principal at each of the 4 buildings. But the person who is operationalizing the plan and directing the work works directly under the principal. And at the high school, that is our dean of students, who is our student-facing administrator. Our assistant principal is our teacher-facing administrator who's working on instruction. Our dean is working on these baseline behaviors. And at the middle school, we have just an assistant principal who is working with teachers and student behaviors. At the elementary schools, we actually only have one administrator in each building, even though we have upwards of 400 students. And so we have a teaching position in each of those schools, the instructional and intervention specialist who support the building principal with baseline behaviors, and those are your school climate specialists.
And that's one of a long list of responsibilities that these individuals
Correct. They
have.
were not hired for this. This is part of the work that they do. So they have had to, we've always taken this on as our work, but the more formal pieces of it just means a shift in workload for folks that we already had on staff. So I would like to end, and then I can answer any questions because I'm sure I've missed things, with how parents can partner with the schools. So these are great ways to stay involved. Number one would be to stay informed. So please do take some time to go over that school climate policy on the website. Know who your coordinator and climate specialists are. And those school improvement plans are driven by the school climate surveys. So as I mentioned, unfortunately, we typically only have about 60 out of 400 to 500 or 600 families replying to those surveys. So if we don't have your voice, we can't respond. So we would invite everyone to reply to those surveys because those form our goals for our improvement plans. And please do communicate with your child's teacher or administration as needed. We are always here and willing to address anything that may come up. And like I mentioned, there's very few things that rise to the level of bullying by definition, but there are lots of little behaviors, most of them developmentally appropriate, that we do handle on a day-to-day basis. But please reach out and then we can support any concern.
Thank you. Any questions for Assistant Superintendent Jen Person?
I have one question. Well, I have a lot of questions.
Sure.
When you went over the data,
Yes.
you mentioned one event and then you mentioned multiple students. Are the numbers on here for each student?
Those are the number of individual confirmed incidents. So for instance, there's one number, the highest number was six verified incidents. That was actually 2 events with a few students involved. So if there was one event with 2 students and another event with 4 students, that's the 6th, even though it was really only 2 things that happened.
Okay, thank you.
Just gonna grab my water, but I can keep answering questions.
The respondents to the survey, I wonder if we can't come up with creative ways to campaign and just get the word out and the importance of families participating in the survey.
Always a challenge. Surveys tend to have low response, but yes, we would like more people to participate, so we certainly can look at incentivizing and educating parents about the importance. We do use the data. The more people that participate, the better the data.
The data's important to go by, actually.
We actually have really strong, and thank you, Principal Dunn and Principal Tanis, our students at grades 6 through 12 respond. The positive piece is that their responses, while it's a much larger sample, align nicely to the parent responses. So I do feel like we're hitting the mark with the parent survey. We're not just getting folks who are extremely happy or extremely dissatisfied, because it is reflective of the student response.
That's a good point.
But yes, we would love more engagement and participation. We're offering a lot, and we need folks to accept that.
And you say you had more questions?
Yes, I always have a lot of questions.
That's
but
okay.
One more question. You mentioned all of the things that are being done all the time.
Yes.
So the school-wide, the classroom routines. How do we measure that those things are working? Is it only the survey or are there
Yeah.
performance reviews, or how do we know it's all working?
Yep, that's great. So those are all the things we're doing primarily on the learning environment, school climate, social emotional learning side. So survey results, we monitor our discipline, minor behaviors that are occurring, major behaviors that are occurring. A minor may be disrespecting another student in class. A major would be a violation potentially with drugs or alcohol. So we monitor all of that. We monitor our attendance, our engagement where we can. And that DESA that I mentioned is a major tool that we use also, because it asks teachers to reflect on students and the elements of their self-awareness, their ability to relate with others, and manage themselves in the school setting. So there will be students who are identified there. And so we monitor those percentages over time there. And we do have, our data that is through the special education side of things, where we do have some students who, once we teach the behavior, they learn the behavior and they move forward. And then sometimes we have students who, even with instruction, reinforcement, are not learning the behavior as quickly as we would expect, or having a hard time sort of navigating social situations. Those are students that would potentially come up in the pupil services arena and maybe have an IEP. And they would get much more direct, targeted instruction from that social worker or psychologist.
Liz, did you have a question?
Oh, okay. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
So when you were talking about like the DESA monitoring, for example, how does that like specifically look in the classroom? Like, is this something a teacher fills out like once a month? Like, how does this
Yeah.
work?
That's great. So there is a letter that's sent home to parents every fall explaining the assessment. And it is something that is done on the teacher side, so it takes 2 to 3 minutes to answer 12 questions about each student in your class, and that happens 3 times a year. So it's not right when we first get here because we don't know our students all that well yet, but in October, January, and May, teachers do take time to fill out those surveys. So at the K-8 level, in essence, our students really aren't involved besides displaying their day-to-day behavior and engagement. At the high school level, students do answer self-reflective questions that go alongside their teacher's interpretation. And so that's another source of data when we compare and things don't align. But it will give us areas, so each student will be flagged kind of at risk or performing at an average level. Students who perform at risk, there's additional questions. So that we decide 12 questions isn't really enough. We now want to take time, maybe spend 10 minutes thinking about one particular student. And so for students who come up verified as having some concerns or needing additional instruction, teachers will then shift their instruction to add more of that for specific students into their day. That answer your question for me?
Yeah.
Okay. I'll add one thing. We also look at that data on a school level and a grade level, and we often find things like the kindergarten class is having difficulty with self-regulation. And that's typical. But if we find out that the 8th grade class is having difficulty with self-regulation, we're probably going to develop some lessons directly for that 8th grade class and teach those through that career advisory piece too. So we use it for individual students, but also to inform like the general lessons we're doing.
Jen, as we're thinking about the new 5-year strategic plan, was there anything on the school climate survey that sort of jumped out like, oof, like maybe we could make that a focus area or area of improvement?
Yeah, on the school climate survey, there's a lot of data. We have data from parents, from staff, from students, and relatively our percentages are high. When each individual school reflected on their climate survey data and pulled out those areas, that's where they're forming goals in their own school improvement plans. So I think we could put all of those together and pull out threads from them to really inform the strategic improvement plan for everyone.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yeah.
Are there 2 surveys? You just said the results are high.
Of the school climate surveys. So
She means the performance results, not the number of people. Is that what you're asking? Yeah. So we have great participation from staff and students. As we shared, the families were hovering in the 60s for how many families respond.
Oh, okay.
But you were referencing
when they do respond, the results
marks
are generally
positive.
favorable.
Yeah.
Okay, so for 10 to 50% response rate that we have, results are strong. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
So for instance, when our school improvement committees are pulling out individual questions and aspects to work on, they're typically looking at responses that are like 75% of people strongly agree with this already. And that's one of our lower percentages. Does that make sense? Okay.
And we're going to dig into that at the board retreat a little bit. And we wanted to actually ask any particular questions around the school climate survey data to please forward those to Monica and I before December 11th, because then we can personalize it a bit, because it's a lot of data. It would take too much time for us to just comb through it. But if you have areas of interest, that would help us as we pull together that data to share. Happy to share broadly, but would like to make good use of our time. So I'll send that out in the Friday update, and then we'll ask for some feedback from you on what specifically you'd like to learn more about.
All right.
Thanks, Jen.
Thank you, Jen.
You're welcome.
All right, next up, we have a Parent Square update. Communications
Yeah.
Specialist Megan Siegel will update the board.
Yeah, so as I think the board is aware, we consolidated 2 positions at the Board of Education Central Office last year in order to make space to bring our communications plan to fruition. And by not hiring an administrative assistant, Jen and I now share, we were able to bring on board Megan, who is making a really tremendously positive impact across the school district. She works in all 4 schools. She's coming to a bunch of evening meetings, sporting events, extracurricular activities, and working directly with students and staff to improve our level of communications. And so Megan has put together a brief overview for you so you can learn a little bit more about Parent Square, which we've been speaking about a little bit here, and we know there's some interest in, and also just offer her services to assist you as you get that app on your phone, so that we can continue to grow our participation. So thanks for spending your evening with us, Megan. I'm really happy that you're able to share. We'll turn it over to you.
Thank you for the introduction. Like Superintendent Burke said, my name is Megan. I haven't met all of you, but it's nice to see you if I have. If I haven't, it's nice to meet you. I'm just doing a brief update on Parent Square in Granby Public Schools right now. So if we can go to the next slide. Just a general overview of what it is. It's a unified school-to-home communication platform where it supports announcements, messaging, alerts, and two-way communication between parents and families. And it's accessible on a website, on a mobile app, and you can also get notifications via email, text, or voice call. So those are some of the what it is, and then some key features about Parent Square is you can have district-wide announcements and emergency alerts. So for example, yesterday with the snow day, we were able to use it for the first time, which was great. It was an awesome way to use it. You can do class level and school level posts. So you can do it by grade, you can do it by classes, you can do it by groups, and so on and so forth. It supports direct messaging with translation support, and that translation support actually extends more than just in the direct messaging. It's for posts in general. So for example, if a family is set up to have their language preferred as Spanish, and an English teacher sends out a comment or a post, they'll receive it automatically in Spanish, and if they respond, it'll automatically translate to English. So there's no work on either parent or teacher side to have to translate those services anymore, which is great. It also helps with forms, RSVPs, and permission slips, and those are some really great features that it has. Now, from what we've been able to use for it is we have 1,687 students in district with 2,004 parents, and 56% of those parents have downloaded the app, which is fantastic. It's a really good number. Out of those 2,004 parents, 1,877 opted to receive emails. 189 opted to receive texts, and then 1,122 parents currently have the app. So about 94% receive emails, which is fantastic. That's a great way to get information. 9% have received texts, and then we have that 56% who's able to receive it via the app. And the app, of course, is absolutely recommended. It's so user-friendly, and we've really been trying to encourage parents to download it. So now, in district, we've been able to provide district-wide updates. So for example, the snow day that we had last week, we were able to post a Happy Thanksgiving post to Granby Public Schools. We've been able to communicate district-wide updates. There are school-level newsletters and announcements. Something that I personally love to see is principals will post every week a newsletter out to families, which is fantastic. For example, on the board, they include pictures, they include updated important events that are coming up, any school closings or early release days in those newsletters. They really are able to communicate so much in such a little platform, which is fantastic. And it's very user-friendly for the principals and the teachers as well to be using it. And we've also been able to do messaging, direct messaging between staff and parents as well, which is fantastic. There's no need for a teacher to text any students anymore. There's no need for any type of private communication. It's all streamlined in one app, which is fantastic. And lastly, we've also been able to do our conference signups from there, which is a new feature. We just did it recently a few weeks ago, and we were able to help the teachers along with that process as well. So part of this all came with a learning curve. It's definitely been a challenge, but it's been a really good challenge. And part of that is we have to get ahead on our end to make sure that teachers and parents are ready to use this app. So part of that process was that we did district outreach. So for parents, we set up, myself, and then John Croninger, our IT specialist, we set up tables at all the open houses where parents could come up to us and get help with either Power School or Parent Square, because both tie in with each other. So we were able to troubleshoot a lot of problems for families who couldn't get into Parent Square because of Power School and vice versa. And we were also able to get parents to download the app right then and there and go ahead and start using it with us, get them signed in. And once you're signed in, you're essentially good to go forever. You don't have to keep signing in on the app, which is fantastic. Including teachers, we've also been able to hold support sessions for teachers demoing the things that Parent Square can do. For example, how to submit a post, how to direct message a family, how to see who gets your postings and who opens it versus who's actually engaging with your content. And we've provided step-by-step support for newer tasks. So for example, we just did parent-teacher conferences a couple weeks ago. So we were able to provide step-by-step instructions on our back end. And then we also provided videos for some teachers and as well as parents. So there was content that went out for parents and teachers to be able to learn how to use this new platform. And lastly, our next steps, we're going to continue staff training and onboarding. We're going to be reviewing analytics to identify trends, so seeing, okay, who's opening these, what families aren't connected to Parent Square, or how can we follow up. We only have about 5 families that aren't connected to Parent Square, which out of 2004 families, that's a pretty good number. And of course, the secretaries work very hard at the school district to find those parents and get that information from them, but it's a really great feature to be able to see who's actually engaging with our posts and our content. We're encouraging more parents to download the app, of course, and I encourage all of you to download it because you do have access through your Board of Ed email. And of course, it's a big learning curve, so we're still learning more about the features and the things that Parent Square has to offer us. So as we learn more, we're planning on adapting that for our teachers and being able to teach them as well. And then our goal is to eventually expand it to community use as well. And lastly, there's the QR code to go ahead and sign in, or to go ahead and download the app. There's also a one-pager as well that has the QR code in your packets.
Yeah, you guys have an easy one-pager in your file, and there's some here on the desk as well.
Oh, you got it. She's ready.
Yeah. Look at that. A number of you are parents. All of you have kids.
Mr. Dunn's Friday.
Oh, Mr. Dunn's Friday email. Yeah. So do all of you have it? Not to put you on the spot, but you do?
Oh, that's great.
It's
so
been
exciting.
a lifesaver.
Yeah.
I mean, it is just being able to, I downloaded it at the beginning of the year, being able to toggle, to do the drop down and go between, I've got one kid in either school, in different school, 2 kids in different schools. So I get to go between the 2 schools in the one app. And not to dig for, it's Spirit Day, what date was that? And not have to dig through like 50 Gmail emails to like find out, the concert band information, and it's just all in one place. It's been a huge.
I thought the conference sign up was way easier than the prior way of doing it, which
that's good to hear. We have some kinks to work out there, but we're glad.
I did find it irritating at first before I knew that I could turn off the emails because I didn't need to see the same thing in the app and on my email. So I figured that out, and then I figured out how to only get notifications twice a week. So it wasn't like bombing me, but twice a week I could look through everything I need to look through. So I think there's so many great features. And then I've gotten a couple of private messages too from teachers, and that's nice. All in that one little app.
That's awesome.
I'll say it, like as an educator, my school where I work has been using it for 3 years now. And as the teacher side, it actually really helps you to communicate better with your families because you can write one message and send the same thing to like 6 kids. And it conserves your time. It just speeds up a lot of things that you need to do from the other end too.
Yeah, it's awesome.
That's so great to hear. Thank you for sharing those perspectives. Like with anything new, and there's so many features that it is capable of. We're trying to go slowly. Megan and John Croninger have just been tremendous support for us as we're learning, as well as giving of their time in the evening to talk with parents. I think that was a really great addition this year. From a superintendent's perspective, and I think important for the board to understand, the back end of the system allows for ease of use and immediate communication that feels like a text message, yet it is all fully secure, following data privacy. If anything were to be, FOI'd or necessary to be looked into or shared for any reason, we have all of that saved. And so even our coaches are using it to communicate with their teams. That has been a game changer for, in particular, our high school, teams, because the ease of communicating with direct messaging is so important when practice is running late and parents need to know, or there's a rain delay. But having those personal cell numbers wasn't really as a secure way to do that. So we're seeing tremendous, positive results, and we're still learning. So huge thank you to Megan for her leadership on that. And we have a number of resources that we're continuing to share. So
Can I add one thing? I think it's been wonderful, and thank you, Megan. I just want to piggyback on the thread that we had earlier around costs and budget.
Oh, yeah, good.
This was actually a cost savings to the district. We had several smaller subscriptions to the newsletter service, to the sign up for conferences service. And when we consolidated and eliminated all of those, it was actually a savings to purchase one product.
That's great.
Yeah.
Quick question. You mentioned community use. Do you mean outside of the school? And can you say just a little bit more about community use?
Yeah, so that we actually haven't rolled out quite yet.
Yeah.
It's a lot of manual back-end stuff, so it's not like in the way that it works is Parent Square is tied to Power School, so everything automatically uploads that data that's pulled from Power School. So yes, you do have to manually enter that community information in. So what that might look like, for example, that's up for discussion right now, is kids who are in other school systems that rely on Granby transportation. But they aren't able to, like, for example, they didn't know that there was no school the other day because they're not a part of Parent Square since they're not in a school system within Parent Square. So we're looking at, okay, let's add them as guests so they can still receive that notification of, okay, Granby's closed, so there's no Granby transportation. So that would be a way to utilize guests in that sense. And then eventually at some point we would like to get other community members who want updates, because we do post things that aren't just for school. We do post things that are related for the Granby community as well. So being able to have them engaged and being able to see urgent alerts such as, oh, there's a snow delay or there's a closure or things like that, they can be updated as well.
That's great.
Yeah, so that is like real-time discovery. With the school closure, that's an urgent alert, and so that means it goes to everyone. And it overrides those preferred settings. Like Liz had said, she has it organized, so she's only digesting her students, her own children's information maybe twice a week. Some parents are doing it on Sunday evenings, whatever it is. But if it's an urgent alert, overriding that to provide you with this important announcement, a lockdown, a school closure, whatever we might deem is an emergent. We learned that we had a few members of our Granby community, local daycare centers who like to know when we're closing school, and a few families who reside in Granby but are attending an out-of-district school placement. We've talked about those through our special education avenue, and they rely on transportation, need to know if we're closing. They certainly can receive those announcements by visiting our website or local television and news stations, but getting that immediate text alert to their phone is now being provided through Parent Square. So Megan researched that on her snow day and discovered that we can manually enter those individuals. So that's going to be our first little pilot cohort for folks that are not in Power School because they're not a registered student or staff member or emergency contact, but they have a connection to our school. So that's going to be our first little pilot group for the community use, and then we would roll that out. So if community members would like to receive posts around the Children's Book Festival or the play or, special announcements as well as those more emergency ones, we'd be able to share. So that's coming. We're just not quite ready yet.
And so teachers can use this to communicate with student groups, teams?
Yes.
all
Yeah,
that
not
kind of-
directly to students just yet. We're using parent contact information, but students are also one of the cohorts that we can directly message through this system. Yes, it's called Student Square, not Parent Square. Again, we have not rolled that out yet.
Yeah, because I know as a teacher, I actually end up texting kids.
Yep,
And
of
they
course you do.
text me
Yeah.
and, field trips and all the rest of it.
Yeah, so that's our goal. It's just only been a couple months, so we're getting to the student square is another aspect, and then the community piece. Yeah, but it's really great.
Any other questions?
All right.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to CPAC update. CPAC is our Capital Planning and Priorities Action Committee. That group is comprised of all three operating boards, 2 members from each board. From the Board of Education, it's Dave Pelling and myself, our Board of Ed representatives. Wanted to update the board and possibly solicit some feedback from you all about our track project. So I'm going to throw it to Sherry and Director of Facilities Krista Gray just for a quick. I know we've sort of had a briefing on where we stand, but just for a quick refresher and update on the track project, and then we can go into some of these sort of extra things around that. So go ahead.
Right, so I'm gonna just work in concert with Krista Gray. So Chris, if you wanna man the podium and I'll stay put. We have a PowerPoint presentation and I will give you a cue because we're gonna go relatively quickly through the first few slides because we're going to focus specifically on the turf track and field and the surrounding athletics complex. So we, as you know, and I've shared these in our Friday updates, and all of this information is posted on the Granby Public Schools homepage of our website for anyone that's listening in or watching this later and wants to review the documents yourself. And now, as Heather said, we're sort of at this point where CPAC is ready to make some decisions. And so first on that list is stadium, field, and track, and the related athletic complex. So I'm just going to intro real quick, Chris, and then I'm going to turn to you. So here are our priorities, which you've heard and this board has voted on. Next slide is one of the projects that were completed this summer. The following slide speaks to our ongoing safety and security, which we are underway with now, and actually are just to the stage where we're cutting some purchase orders to start making movement on this, and the board will continue to hear updates related to it. And then the next slide is where we start some of the historical perspective. I'm not going to take time this evening to go into this, but there are studies back to 2006 focused on the athletic complex and the needs associated with it. It's actually quite interesting reading for anyone that wants to see some of the history. Essentially, back in 2006, there was a comprehensive presentation to the Capital Priority Planning Group back then, 20 years ago, speaking about some of the very same things that we are still understanding are a continuing need. Next slide, please. Gets us into, kind of a little bit more around the phases that were developed. These include things on the town side, around Salmon Brook Park and the use of Aaron's Park. So this historical reference, again, is interesting and relevant because we're still talking about many of these same locations. The next slide gets us to our current stadium, field, and track, which was installed in 2012. At the time, it cost $3.2 million and had an 8-year warranty. So as you can see, we are well beyond the life expectancy of that track. And it didn't include some of the things here which we're still talking about and we're still advocating for. On the next slide, you'll see that previous superintendents did start advocating for money to be sort of set aside, if you will, through the small capital plan to eventually replace the turf. These items were not previously funded. There was no set aside for the replacement. So that brings us to our current day, where we're seeing that starting in about 2022, there were some major issues starting to pop up. So this is about 4 years ago now, that we saw the track was beginning to fail. And so there were some funds provided to repair, which has been done. And now currently on the next slide, you'll see that we are currently at a place where we must look to a deeper, more broad resolution. We are not holding any track meets. We haven't been able to do that since 23-24 school year. If you drive by, and you'll see in a few slides, Chris will share with you sort of what's happening there with the orange fencing and lack of use. We continue daily to monitor for safety, because we do have new sinkholes popping up. And we absolutely understand that many similar needs that were identified back in that 2006, 2008 era still remain for the overall athletics complex. And we have some significant repairs and replacement that's necessary for this particular track. Next slide, please. I'm going to let Chris take over, and we'll go a little more slowly with these slides. And if the board has questions, I think it's probably easiest, would you agree, Chris, to have them just ask them while we're talking about a particular aspect?
Yep.
And so you've heard some of this before, but Chris will just give us what I call it, the balcony view, just kind of like a high-level overview of kind of where we are with the track and what the issues are at hand.
Right, so as Sherry stated, some issues arised in 2022 where some sinkholes were concentrated in one area. An engineering firm, Haley and Aldrich, came and they did these test bore hole sites where they go down anywhere from 10 to 15 feet. They take the actual sleeve of soil out and they kind of open it up and they see what's in there. And what they were finding were gaps of space, which usually means there was something decomposing there. They were finding extraordinary amounts of specks of brick, wood, and not just
Go to the next slide. It shows what he's talking. There you go. Perfect. Oh, back one. There you go.
Yep.
Thank you.
So on the left is kind of what a normal turf field should look like, properly compacted, the brown area, and then with some further underlayment and layers, the gray always leading up. And kind of on the right is what's happening is you're creating pockets that are sinking over time. You don't think about it, but if there's 22 football players on a field that weigh 200 pounds each, that's a weight on there. I started here just about a year ago, and in the spring, even though we had a fairly mild winter, I found another section that we had to cone off that it was appearing at. So Haley and Aldrich originally came in 2022. They just identified one area. That's the only area that was tested. And they said you have a lot of areas where there's sinkholes as far as 8, 10, 12 feet down where things have decomposed. And you just have these air pockets. Then over time, they just kind of collapse and the ground sinks there. None of the rest of the area of any of the track or turf field was tested until I came, and we kind of re-engaged with them and started to look at, let's stop putting Band-Aids on it, and what's the real fix. Part of that was we had them perform this summer a test of the entire track and the entire turf field to determine, what we don't want to do is we don't want to fix based on one area, and then in a couple of years, we're here asking for more money because more sinkholes appeared. We want to have an idea of what it all looks like. So they did come back with some good news-ish. They did find the potential for some of these materials, but they were only finding it 3 to 5 feet down. But there were a few random spots. They did an additional, the first time they did 12 locations. This time they did around the entire track turf field. Just think of the number 5 on a die. They did it on both sides of the field. And they found a few, just 1 or 2 that were 10, 12 feet down. But everywhere else, they were finding these organic materials 3 to 5 feet down. Their recommendation was a full restoration, which would involve excavating 12 to 15 feet down the entire track. That would disturb all of our drainage, all of our electrical. It would cause us to have to look at the footings for the bleachers, as well as bleed over into kind of the practice field. It's an enormous undertaking, and what they would do is they would take the soil out, screen it on site, and recompact the proper layers, the 10, 12, 15 feet, till we get to proper compaction. And then the company comes in and they would lay a turf field like would normally be laid anywhere. That option starts at $10 to $12 million, and it comes with no guarantee from the field turf installation company. It's have somebody compact it. We have a division that can do that, but it comes with no warranty, because if something was buried there, if it used to be woods, you're finding what's 5, 10, 15 feet down. There could be stuff 20, 30 feet down. We can't be liable for that. So, from a time standpoint, it would be a 9 to 10, 11-month process to do that, and we're getting no guarantees, and you're paying $10 to $12 million for and this is just, and we'll talk about all the other possible projects, baseball, practice field, lights, all those kind of add-ons. That's just for the turf and track field, $10 to $12 million, and that's if they don't find anything, and that also includes that we'd have to redo all of our electrical, all of our drainage, and you're really, it's a massive undertaking.
So that was the option that we believed for
Yes.
a while was our only option. So I'm going to have you just go relatively quickly. This is what it looks like right now. These are our sinkholes, a smaller one that was repaired, but 2 substantial ones, and then we expect after the winter we will likely see more. Go to the next one. As I've already said, there's a tremendous impact already. You can go to the next slide. And so this is the proposed solution that Chris just described. Greater than $10 million, absolutely cost prohibitive. Not only cost prohibitive, but also the time that it would take to do this level of work was not sufficient. Chris spent countless hours, I'll say days and weeks, on the phone and going back and forth. And we've settled on this, which is option 2 in the packet that you also have in front of you. It's the skinnier packet. It has the picture of the 2 fields on the front. And this is detailed much more specifically in option 2. But Chris, you want to give us an understanding of what this option is that CPAC is now considering?
Sure. Under this option, what would actually happen is the turf company would come in and they would just go down a regular amount, several inches, like they're preparing a field. But what they would do is they would pour a concrete base called post-tension. And as you see on the right, it's if you've ever seen a big driveway poured, it's pouring concrete and it's putting tension bars and rebar throughout the whole area. It's done in large colleges and universities. Most artificial turfs and NFL stadiums have them. I was saying that's why you can go to Gillette Stadium in the summer and see Kenny Chesney or Taylor Swift, and they're getting, they've got the dirt track and dirt bike races and things like that, because they have a concrete base, and they literally will just roll up the whole turf, have whatever they need to have on there with no weight limitations. With this, will you still have the issues underground? Yes, but now you're basically putting a concrete slab over it. We've had no indications that we have like massive areas. I'd be more concerned if all 39, 40 test sites had 10, 12, 15 feet down and we really had lots of sinking. With this, it's going to provide a concrete base of several inches around the entire area. Number one, it's going to come with a 25-year warranty and guarantee. And also, the next time it needs to be replaced, it's going to be as simple as literally rolling up the old turf and replacing it with a new one. As I've said before, my kids will be around before there will be issues with a concrete base when you pour post-tension concrete like this.
So that is our recommendation to CPAC, which was broadly understood and supported, I would say, by the committee. And so my understanding of where we are now is both Heather and David really needing additional feedback from the Board of Education around support for that particular solution. And then what else does it make sense? It's a logical solution. And also when you go to bond, and also, by the way, we are seeking grants. I spent hours today finalizing letters to all of our state senators and representatives. I've done this now twice. They have this presentation, they have all of that information, because this isn't only a school project. Countless members of our community also use our turf fields and track for walking, Bearcats football, and Rovers soccer, and cheerleaders, and many, many, many things. So it's so much more than a football field and a track. So what you see here is a summary. We are talking now about stadium, field, and track, and that's about $5.5 million. And then you see a list below it of sort of, we're calling them additional improvements. Many of these items were originally suggested back in 2006 and considered in 2008, but for costs and other reasons, they were left off. Of the list, as the superintendent of schools and in collaboration with our athletic director and our principals and certainly Chris DeGray, our director of facilities, we highly recommend the LED lights be considered. There's longevity in that project because it's energy reduction in cost in the future. Some estimates are that the cost of the lights will pay for themselves in just 2 to 3 years. It would allow for much more energy efficient use of our field. We do use the field in the evening. There's many challenges with the current lights. They have to sort of warm up, and there's a power surge that comes with that. They've gone off prematurely, which causes a tremendous safety hazard. So although all of the things on the list are worthwhile for your consideration, our recommendation is that the LED lights should be a strong consideration.
Another, if I could just jump in,
Yep.
from my conversations recently with the company that's proposed all this, another great benefit to switching to the LED lights is obviously they're much smaller. It's a smaller array. Westfield, where I'm from up in Massachusetts, is actually building one of these, and I've been able to go tour the site a couple times. They're building it from scratch. They're having a stadium for the first time, and they've got the ball netting, they've got their end zones in, they haven't even laid the field, but have their footings for their bleachers and their LED lights, and they're really, as opposed to kind of these big round units, they're kind of like that. So it's a smaller footprint, and what might be of consideration is they said, we can swap to LED lights, and it certainly will be brighter, it'll be much more energy efficient. But if you want as an option on the space between the turf field and the practice field, we can change that array, and since you already have a set over on the left side of the field, we can put enough lighting on there to still take care of the stadium field, but we can retrofit it so you now have some lighting on your practice field. If you were going to ever have games on a regular basis, it might not be enough. You might want to look at an array on the opposite side, but they could retrofit it, so now you at least, especially this time of year in fall, you would have access to lighting on the practice field,
Yeah, and
which
we
would be a
call
great
it
benefit.
the practice field. It's Field 2, and it's fully functional for games, and it is often used for JV and freshman games. And we have lots of need, for that. So lighting on that field has been a consideration. We haven't spent as much of a focus on Field 2. However, this is also well beyond its life expectancy. It was installed at the same time in 2012. It's not showing any sinkholes. However, it is beyond life expectancy, and it's at a considerable cost savings to do both fields at the same time. The equipment and the people are here, so it does make sense to do Field 2 at the same time. This field absolutely needs to be what do you call it? It's not a full replacement. I don't know if that's the right word, but the turf needs to be replaced.
It will be a replacement of the turf. It will
Yeah.
be go much quicker, and from my latest conversation with them, if they were to do both fields at the same time, it would be about a $125,000 discount because they're already there, their equipment's there, their people are there.
But that wouldn't be the cement, that would just be
Correct.
overhauling. what's
Correct.
there.
And certainly, this isn't anything that we're going to build tomorrow, so just to be proactive, we've engaged Haley and Aldrich, who asked us to reach out to them right after winter, and we are just going to pick a handful of random spots on the practice field and have them do test boring. From being in CPAC and talking to Mark Newman and some people in town who have been here, they said that area used to just be a sandy hill, which would line up with what we're seeing, because we're seeing nothing on that field whatsoever. It kind of stops right near the track line surrounding the main turf, Field 1. But we would test it just because we want to make sure that we're being prudent with our money and not finding out years down the road. But from just visual inspections, I would be surprised if we found anything in that area, but we will do a smaller scale testing this spring.
So in other words, Field 1 was the field that had to be filled back in the day, but Field 2 was existing, it never had to be filled, so the risk of sinkholes is low.
Correct.
I have a question. I thought I had heard at some point about a higher risk of injury to athletes when there is concrete underneath turf. Is that something that has come up, or Is that a concern?
I'm not aware of that, and that hasn't come up in our conversations. As Chris shared with you, it's the standard for college stadiums, but we could certainly ask those questions and learn more.
Yeah, I think from a liability standpoint, I would think that they have, I'm sure there's a different way they compact it over soil as opposed to a concrete base, and there would be additional layers of cushioning built into it, would be my assumption. Otherwise, NFL stadiums, colleges wouldn't be doing it. You'd have, certainly there's always injuries, but it's a question we'll investigate.
I think they're talking about the difference between turf and grass. You see,
Right, there's more injuries
there's
on
more injuries on turf versus grass.
Yeah.
slippery, yeah.
And then the other consideration that I know David and Heather would appreciate feedback on is other inclusions for our athletic fields. This board has had a number of conversations about the conditions of the current baseball and softball fields. We recognize that there's some considerable improvements that are needed. We certainly explored grass improvements, and those were also quite costly. And there were no guarantees that they would reach the level that we would like to see for our student athletes and players. So for consideration is also a turf infield for the baseball field, which would allow us to play baseball and softball there with lighting. Are these the numbers that are most recent?
Yes,
Okay.
it's closer to the 3.4. And it's funny, like you mentioned, if you go back to that study from 2006, 2008, they just talked about soil testing and the quality of grass, and that for those fields to be successful, they need to be rested about every 2.5 years, where you go a season without using them. Clearly, they're used around the year. The middle school uses a playground area. Certainly, since we've kind of developed a beautification and grounds team within the past summer, there's a lot of challenges just with being level, with fertilizing, with irrigation, things like that. And in discussion with this company, they said they certainly also do grass fields, but it would be about, an 8-inch excavation all around, and if you're constantly using the field, you're just going to be back in the same boat in 3 or 4 years if it's not getting rest. And also, and it's somewhere in the plans of this master plan, you're not just getting a baseball field. This whole complex over on that side, you would have a layout and imprint of your baseball field, your softball field, and your soccer field would all be lined out within that. It would be that entire field area right up until where it drops down to the softball field area.
Yeah, it's more than just a baseball field, and that is in the center of the lengthier packet, which was posted in board book for anyone viewing from home. The packet is dated April 21st, 2025, and you can see, it does not seem as though that there are page numbers, so I apologize, but it says baseball, and it's the project budget that shows you exactly how we would be able to use that field for baseball, softball, and have some additional playing for lacrosse, soccer, and other fields. It would be a multi-use field for, that $3 million range. So those are the considerations that CPAC is now speaking to. This is the timeline for Stadium Field, not terribly relevant for our current conversation, so I think we're all set with the PowerPoint for now.
Yep, as far as the timeline, like I said, if they had to do the full excavation, it would be 9 to 12 months. You'd lose 2 seasons. With the post-tension, even if they're doing both fields, they feel they could do it in less than a 5-month aggressive timeline. So they would want to schedule it at a time where we would only affect one sports season. Either wait till the end of football season and get a bunch of their pre-work done, and then hit the ground running right after winter and be done. We might not hit the mark for a commencement under that model, or if they started in an early summer, they for sure would be wrapped up by November. That would be their goal, is whenever it gets to that final point, they would want to try and only impact one sports season for us.
Thank you, Chris. And we'll take any questions, but I know, Heather, you wanted to gather some feedback. So we don't need the PowerPoint any longer. Thank you so much.
So we have this meeting, and we have one more Board of Ed meeting before our next CPAC meeting. So please feel free to ask questions and share your thoughts now. If you feel like you want more time to process and ask questions and then we can answer them in the next Board of Ed meeting. We can do that as well, but please feel free to chime in on any thoughts. Dave, anything else to add?
Yeah. It's been an education for me being on that committee. And, starting at ground zero, 90% of our tax revenue in the town of Granby comes from property taxes. So we don't have a Route 44, we don't have a Celestine Highway, we don't have any retail to speak of, we don't have any warehouses, we don't have an airport. So it's one consideration. And I guess the pattern historically has been that, every 5 to 7 years, they take out a bond, they figure out a list of projects and go forward. So not only are we considering these projects on their own merit, and for instance, the baseball and softball fields have now been neglected for seemingly decades, but there's a interest in, a middle school renovation potentially coming out of the same budget, a new library or a library expansion, pickleball courts. It's just, there's a lot of competing interests, but the pile of money can only be so big and so bearable for the property owners here in Granby. So I think we're not going to get everything. And we really got to be intentional about what we're going to really press for.
Yeah, we're not going to get everything. And I think as far as where we've gotten on CPAC now is that the track has been identified as a priority because it's sinking. So I think that's where we are focusing. I think the conversations continue on the middle school and how we approach that and the scope of which we can approach that. And so we're not going to start diving into that quite yet until until we have a little bit more information and a little more guidance. So I think, we are prepared as a town and as CPAC and our Board of Finance to look at, what us as a board recommends and what we would want to ask the town to go to bond in terms of this project. So I think we would want to look at it as from between, 5 and 6.5 million, from a budget standpoint, from a bonding standpoint. And so within that reference, within that scope, if we're looking at, the fields, one, do we want to also ask for the LED lights because we think there's a return on investment there? Do we want to look at field 2? Oh, bathrooms we didn't discuss. You said, I think the price on there was 500,000 was an old estimate. We think it would probably be double that.
Yeah, we kept the $500,000 estimate because we did not have, and we do not currently have, the resources and tools to fully investigate the details of putting in a bathroom. As I think anyone that's been to the fields know, we have porta potties there. It doesn't quite meet with the situation at hand and so many spectators and student athletes quite a distance from the building, and the building is not accessible after the school is closed, for the evening. Interestingly, there was an estimate for about $500,000 from 2018. However, the town did present at our most recent CPAC the addition of a similar style bathroom at Salmon Brook Park for about $250,000. So we need more investigation and hopefully collaboration with the town, because it really is a DPW sewer, type project beyond the scope of the Board of Ed. Or we'd have to pay to engage architects and have some folks come out and give us a specific model. But we're not looking for anything fancy. We're just looking for fully enclosed bathrooms that would go through the seasons, that have to be heated, very similar to what they're looking at Salmon Brook Park for. So, we felt perhaps that $250,000 would be a shared estimate, but we certainly need more information. bathrooms have been on the wish list, if you will, since 2006. And I think anyone that's accessed those fields know how important it is. I can think of a number of surrounding communities that added a turf field along with, a field house, locker rooms, weight rooms, bathrooms. We're just simply focused on bathrooms for the spectators and the student athletes. But that could increase the ask, upward 250 to 500,000.
Right. And what's there now is the porta potties.
Only porta potties that need to be emptied, and we rent them. There's a cost associated with that. We rent them and we pay for them to be properly disposed and replaced. So there is a cost, an ongoing cost that we do pay. So year over year might take a little time, but of course it is a cost that would be negated by having permanent fixtures installed.
Right. And there's no water in the snack shack.
Correct.
Right.
And that would provide an opportunity to,
There's a little water fountain out there
There's a little-
that has very low pressure
Yes.
and doesn't quite do the job, but yes, there is availability of water.
yeah, you would certainly want to take the opportunity to just, if you're putting a bathroom right in the vicinity of the porta potties, to supply water. I'm sure the snack shack would like a sink for cleaning and things like that.
Heather, I happened to be at this feedback meeting, I was just listening in. Do these numbers include the reimbursement we get from the state?
Or no reimbursement for this project.
That was just for the Salmon Brook parts of the
So
project?
I will do my best, but that's on the town side. So the town spoke about funds that they have available on the municipal side. There's a sewer fund. This is not my area of expertise, but the way I understand it is that anyone who accesses town sewer has a fee that they pay for that service. And those dollars, at least portions of them, are, Mike Walsh is going to hate the way I'm describing this. I don't want to misrepresent it. But because you pay a sewer bill, if you have town sewer, there's a fund associated with those fees that they can now access to provide necessary improvements to the sewer pumps in town. And they discussed accessing that sewer fund to help with the cost of an additional bathroom at Salmon Brook Park. That was not a part of the discussion for the Board of Ed in adding this particular bathroom. I suppose that would be something that CPAC could discuss and request of other boards. The town has funds that have been set aside. There's also a Parks and Rec fund that will be able to be accessed to help the pickleball courts, as an example. The Board of Ed doesn't have any funds that we can access. We're only dependent on the state priority grant process, which has very stringent rules and expectations, and it's an authentic grant process. We have to apply for those funds and be considered. And we were discussing priority grant reimbursement with the middle school project because those are items that do qualify. But the turf, track, and field replacement or an additional field for the baseball and softball does not qualify. There was a small discussion around some potential reimbursements if we attached it to a larger project, such as a middle school reimbursement, middle school renovate to new. There were some prohibitive components to that where we weren't very confident that we would get reimbursement, and the timeline is substantially drawn out, which would not fix our problem with the field. So while you were there, they were discussing using the sewer fund for the bathroom at Salmon Brook Park. That was not discussed as an option for the Board of Ed.
Slightly broader question and more, this is my experience. Is there a way to challenge other sources, having other sources of revenue? Like, is there a way to challenge the Board of Selectmen or the Board of Finance to look into, 90% of our revenue is property taxes? I did not know that. How hard is it to create?
They're aware. They're aware. Yeah, those conversations I think that they have those conversations all the time is how can we broaden our revenue source? And I think it's just very difficult in a town like Granby.
Yeah.
So, and yes, I think, I don't want to say we challenge, but I think our operating boards are always looking for solutions and ways to find additional revenue sources, whether that's, efficiencies, with towns or partnering with other towns on some services or whatever that is. But yeah, those conversations are actively happening. But anything on so any early sense on like what, if you're looking at this summary in your packet and we're going through, so stadium, field of track, we're just looking at field 1, we're looking at additional improvements. I think we've discussed, bleachers, press box. Our bleachers are perfectly acceptable in working condition now. I don't think we have to prioritize those at press box. I don't think is a priority. ADA lift, just so everyone's aware, I think it's ADA compliant to that first level of the bleachers.
So we have a ramp and it's ADA compliant, and if you were to put in a press box, it would require an elevator to there, so there's a separate ADA compliance. But right now, our bleachers are in full compliance.
Okay.
And I'll just throw in our high school bleachers, they're starting that this weekend. They'll be in by the end of next week.
The bleachers for the high school gym.
Yes.
For the gym.
Yay. I mean, if you're looking for feedback on sort of what we think is the priority.
Yeah.
My input is the track and the light. My question was around ADA, so I'm glad to hear we are compliant, because I thought, isn't that the law? So I would say, I would agree with press box, a nice to have and not a priority. And it would be sad to miss out on the savings of doing the other field as well. But, I mean, that's almost another $1 million.
I feel like the bathroom would be a really important thing to add. Again, to me, it doesn't feel necessary because we have the porta potties, but it would be so much better, especially like I've been to football games where there's quite a line, it's dark. It's just not ideal.
And it's right next to this.
Yeah. But especially considering that there could be 2 events going on and with both fields at the same time and all the athletes out there for practice and the spectators, I feel like that would be really important to look into further.
And as far as the practice field 2, that really reached the end of its useful life in 2020. And while it may not encounter sinkholes, what I've seen working for Massachusetts colleges and universities is when they just start tearing. They just start tearing and fraying, and players start tripping on them. The crumb rubber kind of gets beneath and it forms all these bumps. They just kind of tear away.
So that becomes a safety issue.
Yeah, and it's 6 years. It's already, today we're going into 6 years past its useful life cycle. We'd be having the same company out in a couple of years when it tears to replace it.
And this is so hard because I feel like all of the projects we've talked about funding are important. I think it's not fair that baseball and softball have had issues with their fields for so many years, and we had that flood issue a couple of years ago. Like, I don't want to focus on
the slope and like the soil. Is it called a gradient?
Just the grading, the soil, the irrigation, everything. The floodplain, kind of how it is.
Right, and I don't want to only prioritize some sports over others. I don't think that's fair. We have many students that use many of the fields.
In the baseball and softball field, that's the same company that's doing the football field that.
Yes.
Doing the baseball and softball field should be an additional
$3.5
million.
$3.4, yeah. Okay.
We did also discuss, I mean, it's not going to be 3 million, but we did also discuss, a campaign to fundraise. I have had the Friends of Granby Football and the Booster Clubs come to me and express interest in assisting with fundraising. So, that's another option to think about fundraising $500,000 for a bathroom. I think we could probably do that, $1 million for, I don't know. I do know that the library expansion project has already launched a campaign. Again, we're a small community. It's the same taxpayers that you'd be tapping for these kinds of fundraising events. I know that as a parent, you're always being asked to fundraise. So certainly there are challenges there. As I expressed, we are going to our state reps and senators to ask for support because there are other state grants available. I do know communities that have received a couple of $1 million. We did receive, I think, $1 million, but I don't want to misrepresent, but about approximately $1 million for the communications project here in town. So those funding sources are out there. It just takes, persistence, I think, and some creativity to be able to fundraise. I personally would like to consider those avenues to try to augment what we can do through the CPAC, because the timing is right too. If you're going to put in a bathroom, you're not going to want to rip up something after you've just put in 2 pristine fields or a pristine field. So, you want to consider smart decision making as well around the timing of these projects, plumbing, running sewer lines, all those kinds of things. It's likely something that you would do now, or you would wait until the next time you're needing to do it with a concrete slab. We're not ripping up that field anytime soon. So depending on where those sewer lines are, which I believe they're right next to the DPW on the road, now is the time to do a project like run water in bathrooms. Something to consider. So perhaps people can think about this. I can put a question in our Friday update, and then we can revisit it at our next meeting on December 17th so that you have the feedback you need prior to the January 5th CPAC meeting.
Yep. Let's do that. All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Chris.
Yep. All right. All right, we're going to need a motion, business requiring action. A motion to approve the minutes from the November 19th meeting.
I'll move that the Granby Board of Education approve the November 19th, 2025 meeting minutes.
Can someone second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
All right.
Any opposed? Any abstention? Thank you. I forgot the word.
Dave, you were not at the last meeting, were you?
What's that?
Oh, yeah. You were not at the last meeting.
Oh,
That's true. Yep.
Dave has to
I
abstain.
Need a motion to approve. Oh, we've got the school calendar. And we discussed this in the last meeting.
So if we make the motion, then we can open discussion. And Jen Parsons does have a brief update to a slight change that we made based on feedback from the last meeting.
All right, can we have a motion to approve the 2026-27 school calendar?
I want to be right.
Yeah, say I move to.
I move to make a motion.
I move that the Granby Board of
I
Education.
move that the Granby Board of Education approve the 2026-27 Granby school calendar.
I'll second.
Discussion?
Yeah, so I'll ask Jen to just comment on one slight change that we made.
Yes, so there is a change that you will see in regard to the start and end dates of the school year. Based on feedback that we heard from both the board and our teaching staff and staff across the district, with the way that the calendar falls next year, we had proposed starting August 20th, which felt very, very early. And it also, there were some concerns about whether folks would be able to find childcare that early in the summer to return to work. So what we have done is typically we have had professional development on a Thursday, Friday, Monday, and started school on a Tuesday. What we have done in this version of the calendar is we're going to bring back teachers on a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and start school on Thursday. So the shift here is from Tuesday, August 25th to Thursday, August 27th, being our first day of school. That will give us a 2-day week, and then a 5-day week, and then a 4-day week, because Labor Day also falls very late. And the result of moving the start date back 2 days would also be that the tentative last day of school is on June 9th instead of June 7th, which is a Wednesday for reference.
So Wednesday instead of a Monday, which we had feedback last time too, that like the last day of school on a Monday felt kind of off, even though we may have snow days for graduation date setting and all that. It seemed better to be midweek. So it's really just based on both our conversation at the board and then some conversations with teacher groups. And Casey Petruzzi's teacher union came and said, hey, would you consider this? And I spoke to the chair and vice chair, and you both thought it would be a reasonable shift without too many drastic shifts, so that you would still be able to potentially approve the calendar this evening.
I think that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Good.
And I will say that while the board is really voting on the start and end date and the vacation or holidays, we do feel like the professional development days are in a really good place on the calendar as well.
Yep.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? No. Any abstentions?
Okay, thank you. So that will allow us to share this with families tomorrow on the website, knowing that there could be some slight adjustments to early releases or parent-teacher conferences, quarters, those kinds of things. But for vacation planning and start and end dates, the families will be good to go. Thank you.
Board standing committee reports, curriculum met tonight.
Yes, curriculum met tonight. We went over the superintendent's monthly report. We got to preview the climate data and ask some questions about that. We've revisited some new potential English elections, which we approved contingent that we can discuss again once the curriculum is finalized and talk about how to make sure parents are fully aware that their children could be signing up for some age-appropriate but mature content, and just ensuring that everybody is aware of what they're signing up for before that happens, both so parents are aware and so that teachers are protected from any blowback on that. And we also discussed a textbook recommendation, which we have tabled to discuss again in the future for math. And we went over the curriculum review cycle too, which is very involved. And Jen, as usual, has her eye on how the details should all work on that.
Thank you. Finance did not meet tonight. Finance will meet next
December 17th.
December 17th. Other board-related reports, Craig or Cave, nothing. GEF?
GEF hasn't met since our last meeting.
Okay. All right, we'll move on to the superintendent's report.
Yeah, just a quick report this evening. As we've already discussed, we had our first snow day yesterday. Just need to give tremendous gratitude to our director of facilities and Dale Kittleson and our entire crew. They are here early and they stay late, making sure that I have all the information I need to help assess the right call, as well as making sure that our school buildings and central office are ready to open, so can't do it without them. Do want to just mention that we have our final strategic planning feedback session being held tomorrow evening via Zoom at 6 p.m. All the details, if anyone wishes to sign up, are on our homepage. And as we've already mentioned, our next meeting is December 17th. This will provide our first look at the budget proposal for the school district and get that budget process underway with what's traditionally been called the +1. So looking forward to those conversations starting up.
Right. This evening, I will need a motion to move us into executive session for a student discipline matter.
Do we have action items first or after?
It's listed on after on the
Yeah, that's fine,
agenda.
because we do have to technically reconvene, so we can do action items then. But for the public or anyone viewing, this will be the end of the public-facing meeting because we do have to discuss private matter in executive session. So there won't be a continuation of the public meeting. Okay. So a motion to.
I move the board will enter into executive session for student discipline matter.
Second.
Favor?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.